Hey, Margie here. So many of us are taking supplements and minerals that are extremely important for our bones and overall health. But are we absorbing the minerals? Well, that's what we're going to look at today. And we're going to delve into absorption as well as something called nanoparticles. And I'm really excited about our special guest, Barton Scott. Barton is a chemical engineer, a nutritionist, and the founder of Upgraded Formulas. Barton is passionate about helping people combat the stressors of daily life, the toxicity of the modern world, the lack of nutrients, and the mineral absorption issues that we all face. He has made it his mission to reduce suffering by increasing the public's understanding of the human body's interrelationships. And today we're also going to look at the hair mineral analysis test and how we can use that to really improve our bones and overall health. So lots of fabulous information. Stay tuned. Welcome, Barton. I'm really happy to have you here on the podcast. This is such an important topic. I love the work you do. You bring a whole different perspective to supplements and to getting micronutrients. And so I'm really, really excited. So welcome.
Thank you, Margie. It's great to be on with you.
I know I'm going to learn a lot from today's talk. So let's actually, before we get started, why don't you briefly tell us about your background and why you're so passionate about
Mhm.
the work you do and how you even came, from your backgrounds to becoming, into what you're doing now with supplements and nanoparticles and all these great things. So why don't you share that with us?
Sure. I'll try to make it brief and make it sort of actionable for people, so they really understand. The background for me was I was studying chemical engineering, and my mom was getting more and more sick, and towards the end of that program, I also started to have a lot of, probably like a lot of people listening, I had a lot of brain fog, and that got just worse and worse to the point where I wasn't sure if I was going to graduate if things didn't change. And then later on, I wasn't sure if I was going to keep my job as an engineer. And I'd been on a full ride scholarship. I had the mental horsepower. I had what I felt like was a near perfect memory before that. And there's a couple different things that led to that. I won't go into too much, but I'll just touch on them and say that maybe like a lot of you, I'd been an athlete. I could have wrestled in college. I chose not to, so I could focus on school and things. But yeah, from winning state championships and that, and playing football both ways. I was a quarterback and all these things. I sweated a lot, I guess is what I'm saying. I was always on the go. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. They're just, and maybe you live somewhere hot where just existing outside and going for a walk means that you're probably just about in a sauna, basically. I live in Austin. It's warm here, especially this time of year. And I see, side note on that, we can talk about it later, like what sauna use is too much and how that might be a bad idea given where your mineral levels are. But my mom had started to get sick. Her name was Rebecca, and she would be 78 today. And she was just this vivacious, just very, intelligent, both emotionally and just IQ. And I saw her really go downhill, and this was like after retirement, being in a really low stress, out in nature a lot, reading, waking up, or like having a great life. And then medication led to more surgery, or yeah, and then more medication. And um I just realized, like, the system was so broken, the medical industry, and that medication was just not ever going to solve a root cause problem. So I started doing a lot of functional testing for myself. I had been supplementing thanks to wrestling. I mentioned that in part because I had been supplementing since I was literally 12. And so by the time I was 22, I had a decade worth of supplement experience in a time where the industry was still like coming to its own. So I knew a lot of good brands already. And I found a lot of different tests that weren't actionable. This goes into everything we'll talk about today. And if any of you have out there have done different functional medicine tests, you know that that some just aren't that actionable. And I do like many, and I do like several others that we won't have time to cover today, I'm sure. But um, the one that really truly changed my life and hers and my girlfriend at the time, her dad, we all did it together, was this hair tissue mineral analysis where you're testing your hair to understand what is currently in there and what's currently missing, along with heavy metals. And you see that over time. So if you test, let's say every quarter throughout a year, you see this pattern, this trend, and then you compare that with your lifestyle and what you're eating and things like that. And it's incredibly valuable if you have a consultation with it with someone that really understands the test. And the problem I found pretty quickly was I got lucky early on. I had a great consultation with someone that's now retired, and he knew a tremendous amount, and I absorbed everything I could from him, and then I went on from there to learn everything that has really ever been written about it. And then we've done thousands and thousands of tests as a company now, um, to the point that I could do a phone consultation with someone and hear in their voice, like, just certain patterns. And I'd look at their tests and go, "Ah, okay, got it." And then I could tell them 8 or 10 things, and our nutritionists today can do that too, that would probably be wrong with them. And they'd go, "Wow, this must be accurate if you can just know these things." Um, and so it, it it's just tremendously valuable, and we can talk about how valuable it is, and why I like it for testing minerals and heavy metals so much. And but that ultimately led me to this point where I realized I wasn't, and my mom wasn't, my girlfriend at the time, her dad, none of us were absorbing adequate amounts of the minerals we were taking, the supplements we were taking, to be able to replenish. So imagine picturing a line graph if someone's really visual, and you have all these bars, right? And you want to see those bars move up or move down, for example, as a result of taking these things that you're taking. And you'd retest and they wouldn't move, and your symptoms would stay as a result. So you have headaches, you have thyroid issues, you have skin issues, you have any number of things. Any problem you have physically is absolutely related to mineral deficiency, I realized, and also potentially heavy metal toxicity. So I ultimately just I created a new way from a process standpoint, given my background, to get minerals to absorb in the body more easily. And we're producing some tremendous results. We have a sleep study right now that I can tell you about too, that's got some great results happening for people.
Wow, this is just, there's so many things I want to ask you. But let's start with something that's different that you notice, because this population, everybody who's listening, not everybody, but a lot of people have issues with bone health and osteoporosis. And, we know that we need to supplement in order to. So this is people listening are on supplements, and we don't want to waste our money. We certainly don't want to waste money. And we know about really getting good, high quality supplements. But the worst thing would be to spend all this money and not absorb. And I never knew you coined this, because I say this all the time: test, don't guess. So I love that. But let's start with something that you do, which really not, is a little different. Why don't you tell us about nanoparticles and what you found out about nanoparticles, and why you feel that's so effective in increasing the absorption, and how these are really affecting our bodies.
Sure thing. So what I realized with nanoparticles, and to be fair, I think, test don't guess might have been used by other people, but we own the trademark, and I'm okay with people using it because it's it's just important that as an industry, I mean, one of my goals is to change healthcare by moving it from sick care to actual healthcare with real testing that works and products that work too. And I saw the whole industry is failing, both from a medication standpoint, a testing standpoint, and a supplementation standpoint, which I think no one had ever really mentioned that. So So my goal is for people to become more knowledgeable about their health through the processes that we have, and and not just only by supplements. But to get to your question about nanoparticles, so I promise this won't. I'm going to keep this like understandable for everyone listening. I know we have a diversity of audience. We have practitioners, we have doctors, we have triple board certified people listening. We have people that are just listening, and just want to be healthier, and they do something totally unrelated. So the way that I teach people to understand this is, so you have your red blood cell, and that red blood cell is a certain size, um, and it's about 10,000 nanometers. So when you look at the particle size of the mineral supplements you're taking, even the quality brands, they're going to be anywhere from 8 times as large to 5 times as large on average. So that means they have to go through your digestive system to be assimilated, so absorbed into the blood, utilized, however you want to say it. And that is super important, because if that doesn't happen, then you wasted your money. And yeah, so the other aspect of this that's really important to understand is that if you're not testing, you could be taking things like vitamin D or calcium that you are high in, or you could be taking something like vitamin D that's causing your calcium to be high, and your calcium's already high, and that's really damaging to your health, and it will age you faster. Maybe your iron's high, and it seems like you have iron anemia. You actually have copper anemia, but you're not testing for copper in almost any case, unless you're doing a hair analysis. So a lot of different advantages, and this is all to say too that if you're a practitioner and you're listening to this, whether you're a doctor of some sort or a health coach or something, this is something you can add to your practice. It doesn't mean that you have to abandon, what you're doing. You can just add it to as another lens, right? And why wouldn't you want another lens, another way to help the people you're working with? So what I realized though is when we get into the red blood cell, if we can do that without digestion, through particle size being small enough, then it will get distributed throughout the body. And that part, I knew certain drugs were doing that. I knew we could do that with minerals, and I knew also that the liposomal technology wouldn't work really. Minerals, wouldn't be fat soluble, so they would come out of solution. There would be issues there. I found out pretty quickly. Um, so we tested that sort of process. That just didn't work. And I ultimately developed a different way of getting minerals to be really small and really stable. And that is our unique and proprietary approach to really achieving a level of effectiveness I've not seen elsewhere through mineral supplements. And that is becoming more and more evidenced by, of course, our testing before and after. You actually get to see your levels move, so that's one way. But beyond that, what's really, really exciting is we are doing multiple sleep studies right now. The first of which right now is 212 doctors tried upgraded magnesium, and they're logged into a software that's tracking their Aura Ring automatically, and it's uploading the data. And the early results from that are a 30% increase in deep sleep. So we'll see how it plays out, but we've seen people double deep sleep, and they were at an hour already. And we've seen them, they've never really been over like an hour and 10, and at least on average, and now they're averaging around 2 hours, which is huge for the, well, how can I say this? Disease and deep sleep are directly correlated. So if you get very little deep sleep, the chances of you developing some sort of disease is um, almost a given. And if you can increase your deep sleep, it drastically reduces your chance of developing disease of any kind. Anyone that knows anything about that area would agree with those statements for sure. So I feel incredible about this because it's improving REM sleep to some extent, like, I don't know, somewhere around in the neighborhood of 10% on average. But the deep sleep is really what we care about. It's really, really um, just incredible to see that improve so much for people that are already pretty clued in. We're talking about functional medicine doctors, largely like chiropractic or naturopathic. So, um, these are people that have been on the path for a while. They know good brands, good quality. They have decent sleep habits, or good, maybe very good sleep habits already. So, yeah.
Can you just tell everybody, because people say, oh, I get 8 hours of sleep, but just tell everybody, how do they know? If I know there's ways that you know about deep sleep, but you want to just go into that a little bit more about what deep sleep actually is and how maybe I'm sure people have told you afterwards that they experience
Mm.
certain things because of the deep sleep.
Yeah, so when you wake up and you feel refreshed and you feel like you can almost like skip coffee, if you're used to doing that, then you got a good night of sleep. And you can be in bed for 10 hours, and if you have to be in bed for 10 hours, you're not getting enough deep sleep. I can just that your body's just not doing the deep sleep game very efficiently. So so that's a one way. I do recommend investing in yourself and getting an Aura ring. That's spelled Oura. And no, no affiliation, at least currently, with them. I'd love to do a sleep study, so please reach out if someone knows a connection there. But that's what I wear, and it seems to be the most effective amount of data for people. In other words, it's not too much, it's not too little. Their HRV, for example, is accurate to something like 99.4% compared to hospitals. So yeah, I mean it's very good. And and regardless, you have a baseline, which is what you really need. Like if you've worn it for a month and you have a baseline of, or even a week, you have that baseline going in, you know what a good baseline is for you, what your average is. So then to see that improve 30% is just eye popping. So yeah, um,
What
it,
about dreams? Do people tend to have more dreams when they have some deep
that
sleep?
that is also a great thing. That's something that our nutritionist will ask sometimes is, I based on your results, I imagine you might not be dreaming. And, I think that really stops people in their tracks and they go, wait, what? How would you know that? And, it's often because we see that their magnesium levels are low, and, often these people are taking maybe a variety of different magnesium supplements. Maybe they're doing transdermal, maybe they're doing oral, they're doing different forms and things like that. So, yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned the magnesium because certain people who are my support staff who help me out with different things take your magnesium. And I'm after this interview, as we talked about, I'm gonna definitely try your magnesium. I'm gonna get the testing myself and we're gonna reconvene after that. But they just said it was truly miraculous how the magnesium really helped them with their sleep as well as their stress levels in general. So it sounds like there's something special in this magnesium
Mhm.
and yeah, so you've gotten very good reports on the magnesium. So in terms of people who have bone loss, since you've done hundreds and thousands of these, what have you seen? What do you see that's lacking, with people with osteoporosis, osteopenia, or anything? What have you been seeing is missing?
Oh, oh, this is gonna shock people.
And we want to hear this from someone
Yeah,
who does this because this
yeah,
is so important.
yeah, brace yourselves. Often it's too much calcium. Yay.
I mean, that's what I
Which is
see. Can I just tell you? I
mhm.
see when people come into me, not in the test, but they'll tell me what they're taking. And, they get it in their diet and they're taking 1,200 milligrams of calcium. And
Oh my
so,
god.
yeah,
Yeah.
I see this on a regular basis. And it's like, no, more is not better here.
Yeah, it's so crazy to see that happen. And there's what we can see in the hair test with a practitioner that really understands how to use it. So whether you're going through one of ours and doing the test and consultation, or doing our course, um, and becoming knowledgeable yourself, in this, as a practitioner, then, and you can find out those on the website. The thing is just that, we get, like you said, calcium is so readily available in the diet. Magnesium is just so easy to burn through. You mentioned stress, and this one product we're talking about right now, upgraded magnesium, being able to solve for that stress, in part by you just sleeping really well. Stress is a signal sometimes. I mean, there's so many different, I think, for variations of stress, but in general, it's your, like, as a whole, it's your body saying that, hey, something's wrong. And that's usually that, your inflammation's creeping up because it wasn't captured, it wasn't resolved in the previous night of sleep. So, if you can just sleep really well, it's amazing how, if you can imagine, just you wake up the next day and you feel refreshed, you're not really in that stressful state. You're in a state where your mind works well, your brain is flushed out well. The magnesium clears phosphate from the brain after intense work sessions, but you have to absorb it. A question we get is a lot about forms, with all of our products, because we have this different approach that's really unique, in our from a process standpoint. Being able to get particles really stable as well as really small. Um, we're able to really just, solve a lot of these things, for people. So yeah, I mean, that's a big one for people. We're going to have a product out soon that's going to have, around the stress, angle too, lithium, which is an element, not a medication. It turns out, I know a lot of people might think of it that way, but you need some lithium in your diet. And there's been numerous studies to show that when the groundwater had no lithium in it, the people had a higher, disposition for anxiety, and the rates of actual suicide were much higher, um, in those areas. So it's important. So magnesium, lithium, blood sugar balancing minerals, which we could talk about too. We'll have a blend of all of that. I wish that was out now, but yeah, really soon. So,
So
but
in
yeah,
terms of, yeah, so in terms of
yeah,
you people, you see too much calcium.
yeah, too much calcium, not enough boron, and then not enough magnesium. So boron can help guide the assimilation of calcium. Magnesium can balance the calcium absorption. Um, yeah, it's just, I would never recommend taking only calcium by itself. So our calcium product has magnesium and boron in it for that reason. So yeah.
Okay.
And you probably
And
don't need as much, if you are low in calcium, you probably don't need as much as you need. So like, the dosage for us is lower. Also, you know, you need less milligrams because you're absorbing a much higher percentage. Um, and yeah. So that, understanding all of those things together, you kind of get this whole picture of like, all right, less milligrams needed on the body just seems to, even intuitively, make a lot more sense, from a balancing standpoint, than taking a mega dose of anything. Um, yeah.
and so your magnesium, let's get into that for a minute. What does that contain? Just the magnesium?
Yeah, so it's what we do. I mean, you'll read the label and it'll probably be a little misleading because it'll say nano magnesium chloride. It's not at all what you would think when you think of, say, a magnesium chloride. We're starting off with the elemental magnesium. It's going through our process. It's unique and proprietary, and then I like to bind it with chloride because your body also needs chloride. um, the when you think about getting magnesium from food sources, your body doesn't, go, oh, I'm sorry, Margie, you can't use this for the brain, you can only use this for other muscle tissue. It's not how it works. So being able to provide a endpoint solution like that, it was always the goal from day one. So yeah, we've been around for a while now, so it's we've experimented with all sorts of different things and really settled in this area as being the best. Um, so yeah, I mean, stopping cramps really quickly is one way it's working, and it does. Usually within 5 minutes. Great for the ladies that have painful periods. Your period really should never be painful, and then it's just another warning sign that something's wrong. So yeah. But same with muscle cramps, same with headaches, same with constipation. It's just our bodies talking to us in a way that we don't currently speak the language of, most of us. So, um, if we're really clued into these symptoms, we can be finding these deficiencies, solving for them, solving for the problems. I really believe with hair, um, we spot deficiencies that could take a lot longer to show in other ways, because hair is tissue. It's just like skin is tissue, just like your bones are tissue. All of this is tissue essentially, um, and when we're measuring from that point, we're really getting the right place, the optimal place to put in the dipstick, because I've said it for a long time, but blood is us on our best behavior. So it's so our blood is so nutrient rich. It's really important that we understand that, and understand that it's not going to be the first place that we're going to show a deficiency. It won't. I'd be doing a disservice if I said anything else to people. So I know a lot of people didn't know that before they heard that today, and that's okay. We're constantly updating everything we do as an industry, I think, which I love. I love this industry so much. We have so many like family level friends in the industry. I do, and I think a lot of people feel that way. I know you feel that way, and we're all learning from each other, and it's really beautiful. So
Well, what I like is the fact that you can see a deficiency. If someone acts on it, you can test again. And as I've read your information, it's correlating with symptoms. So
mhm.
it's not only that, okay, yes, my test is showing that I've improved this, now I'm absorbing, but it's also affecting my health. And the second thing I think that is good, that there's so many people in the world and so many people in this community who has, with digestive issues. I mean, right now, unfortunately, and yes, we can deal with these, which is good. And I'm such a believer in dealing with the root cause. But if you're not absorbing, you're really, it's very unfortunate that you're, taking supplements and trying your best, but yet not absorbing. So the fact that the nanoparticles and your technology can really increase absorption, to me, is very exciting. And I think that that's, commending. I think you need to be commended on figuring this out. So that's really great. So I want to talk about a couple of the other trace minerals, because I know that's something sometimes people aren't even aware of. So you want to just share some of the important things with trace minerals and why
Sure,
that's so important.
sure. Well, there's different things there. Um, it's a really good question, because I think that that's the exact entry point where most people are thinking about it. So we do, for example, we have a product that's trace minerals. We also have some fulvic acid in there. Um, but though that's just like a broad spectrum approach, right? And then within that, we we also have large doses of those trace minerals if someone knows they're deficient in something like selenium, which is an anti-aging mineral. I mean, all these minerals are related to skin health, to hair, all the outward signs of beauty. Plenty of hair on your head, thyroid function, which is directly correlated to outward signs of beauty. All these things, right? Um, Thyroid function is also connected to, and so is adrenal. The whole endocrine system is something I really like to geek out on, and and think about a lot, because if we get that working well, then we're detoxing well naturally, we're eliminating well, we're having good bowel movements. Because if you're reabsorbing, if you imagine for a sec, just reabsorbing all the toxins that your body's trying to remove through your bowels, or your even urine, but um, then of course things are going to fester. You're going to have issues in the gut, and bacterial overgrowth of different kinds and things. So if the endocrine system is low, if you have low magnesium, for example, you're not going to have regular movements. P.S. Because ours is absorbed so readily that your body doesn't really have that response where you're suddenly having disaster pants, as I like to call it, where you're going like, oh, I got to go now, and um, so you kind of want that in between zone where you're having full bowel movements. And it's something that I think here in the West we still like shy away from talking about, and it's a shame because everybody poops, and you need to just do it well. Otherwise you have no chance of living an optimal life, frankly. There's just like it's a requirement. And all of this fits together because these are really just puzzle pieces, the way I think of it. You have your whole entire periodic table, right, Margie? And when we look at that, what do we see? We see a level of math and physics and chemistry there that we have to obey, really, if we want to have an optimal life. So if we're not testing for all those elements in relationship to each other in particular, then we're going to be missing the mark no matter what else we're doing. It doesn't matter if you're doing stem cells, V cell, all like exosomes. Doesn't matter if you're doing bioidentical hormone replacement. Like, maybe you don't even have to if you're getting your minerals right. For example, in my own case, when I was in my mid-20s, my testosterone was under 600 total. And then now in my mid-30s, I'll be 35 soon, um, my testosterone is almost exactly 1,000. So, and I'm not doing I'm not doing any like hormone replacement or anything. So, when you think about that, just over time, testing, supplementing with products that really work, and then getting enough sunshine, meditating, doing things like that to relieve the stress burden. I mean, I'm CEO and founder of this company. Plenty of days where I feel stressed, but my body's resilient enough to handle it, and I'm supplying nutrients so that the body can be resilient. This is really what we need, because also when we give birth to children, if moms that give birth have, for example, iodine deficiency, just iodine deficiency alone has been shown clinically to have a up to 20-point lower IQ, which is just not acceptable. Like, we can't handle that. If we're going to innovate out of things like our soil being depleted and running out of topsoil, we need really smart people and continually smarter people on the planet. And we need these nutrients in the short term as a fix. So that's something I'm passionate about too. And all of this is connected to ADHD, nutrient deficiency, specifically minerals, and heavy metal toxicity too. So yeah,
Okay. So,
really
so
cool.
one thing I just, before we get into, because I want to get into heavy metals, because what I like about your testing is that you can, within one test, you can find out your deficiencies plus the heavy metals, which is so important when it comes to our bones, because that's a very big factor that people do have, that they're storing these heavy metals in their bones. So I think it's so very important. But I just wanted to mention fulvic acid, because there are numerous people who have really found correlation when they, with bone loss and fulvic acid, and that it's been, you want to just talk about fulvic acid for a second, what you found?
Yeah, fulvic acid, we have that in a couple of our blends too. Just because we know through studies that it can help as a mineral transporter, and to some extent help move heavy metals out of the body too. So, yeah, yeah. So
Okay, so let's switch over to heavy metals, because in the hair, now a silly question, I know people are listening. What about the people who dyed their hair? Is there any problem when
Mm,
they're with that in terms of the testing?
we used to think that it was more of a problem than it is. So ideally, okay. So if given the choice, if your hair's currently dyed, take it, send it in. Here's why. Because um, the main minerals that we're looking at, it's not like everything's equal. Like boron is not equal to calcium and magnesium, like in terms of the impact on the system. But boron's also way more important than like thallium or barium, or understanding like that your levels are high in some things. So, if we'll see like elevated levels of 10, but we're not really looking at 10 levels, so, if someone's dyeing their hair a certain color, or we'll see elevated levels of cobalt, we're not, that's not an incredibly important part. And it's not about optimizing, particularly on a first or second test, every little thing. We purposely focus on a certain like, big movers, right? That's not going to be disrupted. So,
Oh,
but
great. Okay.
yeah, cut your hair, send it in. We've got a return label. It makes it easy. The kit's beautiful, and it ships to over 30 countries around the world. So, yeah, yeah. We've really made it a lot easier to understand hair testing. Kind of brought that out of the dark ages. So.
And what have you seen in terms of, so let's now go in terms of bone loss and osteoporosis, in terms of the heavy metals, what have you been seeing that people are coming in with in terms of heavy metals?
Yeah, so with bone loss, the thing, so here's what happens with bone loss, from everything I've been able to learn throughout the years, in researching this, in creating products and testing and talking to patients, and talking to our nutritionists that are talking to patients, is that what happens is, to make our blood really, ideal, because if our blood pH changes even a little bit, we die. So the way the body, in its unique intelligence, maintains this, is it pulls from our bones and from our tissues to maintain our blood. So I'll say that one more time. Our body pulls from our bones and our tissues to maintain our blood. And that's how the body works, right? So ideally, you want to remineralize your bones, so that heavy metals don't end up in there. So minerals activate all the enzyme pathways in the body, all the enzymatic pathways in the body, right? So when the minerals aren't there, some heavy metals can activate to a certain extent, like a certain portion of those enzyme pathways, not as efficiently, not as effectively, and certainly with a toxic end result, which means that different heavy metals will end up in the bones if you have mineral deficiencies, and they're difficult, as you might imagine, to get out of the bones. Um, and yet, it's a overtime process to do that, and that leads to fragility, for example, bones being brittle, um, and and we see that a lot, right? And things like, sugar, alcohol, caffeine, really do deplete. And if you're doing those things, it's just even more important that you get on top of your minerals and you supplement all these things daily. I literally take, quite a few of our products daily, travel with them all the time, daily. So yeah, understanding that concept, which is, when the bones become brittle, it's because heavy metals have been added, minerals have been stripped out to nourish the blood. And that's, my own mother had that happen. She had osteopenia, um probably also osteoporosis at some point too. And it's just a lifetime of, having some sugar and doing, just like doing her best, but not not supplementing with products, not having products to supplement that absorbed well, not testing, so therefore guessing. And that led to heel spurs, so there's signs along the way, right? You have heel spurs. Oh, well, that's a problem. The body's depositing excess calcium in one of the places that heel spur is going to cause pain and let you know that something's wrong. That's a sign, that's a symptom. And hopefully you catch it before that there. So
What typically do you see in terms of the hair analysis? What are you seeing as people having too much when it comes to the heavy metals? What have been the most common ones in general that you see?
um deficiencies, that is, besides.
Oh, I'm saying the heavy metals. What have you been
Oh,
seeing? Yeah.
yeah. Oh gosh, we see a lot of mercury, which is the worst offender, from my perspective. But really, I think the most toxic element out there. Certainly, like, people are concerned about plastics in their water. Okay, good reason, but mercury is just a lot more toxic. It's something like 1,000 times more toxic than lead, and lead will drive people crazy. Mad Hatters, right? I think a lot of us know, like, the Hatters. They would put lead inside, they'd wear it, they became insane. Real problem, becoming insane, that is. So we want to avoid that. So we see lead, we see mercury, we see a lot of aluminum. Everyone has aluminum toxicity, it seems like. Yeah, it's just ubiquitous. We're drinking it out of cans. We're using
Mhm.
tin foil. We're cooking in pans that are aluminum. We're going out to eat with places that have aluminum. So really, the only defense against that is to be doing binders and minerals that help with that. And there's, just this whole process remineralizes the body so that you naturally start to push out these heavy metals, and that's the safest and most effective way that I found to do this. Chelation therapy is, of course, expensive, both from a time perspective and a cost expect. So I don't like chelation. I also find that it can be dangerous, and that it also ultimately dysregulates a lot of mineral patterns in the body. I'm sorry if that's bad news for some people. If you've been doing that for 10 years, this really is a better way. And again, if that wasn't true, I would find some other way to do it. But
I
that's it's.
guess you're seeing the results. So what you're saying is when people remineralize and make up for the deficiencies, they have been able to detox the heavy metals, which is encouraging.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's
yeah. I
certainly
mean,
an easier way, so that's, but I guess you're testing. So I think that's the important thing. We're not just making this up. You are testing and seeing the difference.
yeah, and heavy metals, to set expectations, it's going to be a multi-year process because it's been a multi-decade process of accumulation. So it's not overnight, but your symptoms are going to start alleviating quickly, which is great. And then from one test to another, your body will peel like an onion as you become healthier. If you've been in a place where through stress and maybe raising children, or just working long hours, all sorts of things, the environment itself is roughly 1,000 times more toxic than any other time in recorded history. And in one day in a city, we encounter more toxins than someone did something like several hundred years ago. So we have to defend against that. It's not just offense, it's defense too, at a cellular level. And when the cells are happy, we're happy at an organ level and then a body level, which is incredibly inspiring to think about from that perspective. So,
Great. I one more question, and then I want to ask about like where people should start. But
yeah.
I know that you talk about zinc, and zinc is something that's very important for our bones. But I know that I've read some of what you've written that sometimes women can have too much zinc. And what do you see with that? Because that could be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Both women and men can have too much zinc. And from a personality perspective, it makes you overly analytical. From a bacterial susceptibility standpoint, that's a problem too, because zinc is antiviral, and so is iodine. They're also Iodine's also antibacterial. Zinc, though, is interesting because it balances with copper in the body, and this is one of the ratios we look at in the hair test. And you get to see, for men or women, if they're trying to balance testosterone or progesterone, zinc is governed by that, or governs that. In other words, those levels will be off if your zinc levels are off. And then copper, if your estrogen is off, it's because your copper and zinc ratio is off. So that is a big place to look. And I don't know of anyone that's really teaching this. So I have a book that will come out later this year, and it'll touch on a lot of this. So definitely look out for that. And people can hop on the mailing list and stuff. But
No, that's interesting because we all know about zinc and copper, that you do need to balance that out. And if you get too much zinc without enough copper, that's a problem. So I think that's common knowledge. But that's interesting that that's what you're seeing when people have, um, too much
yeah,
zinc, because zinc has
right.
become very, very popular these days as something to, you know, get your zinc. You'll help prevent different things that are existing right now. So,
Mm,
yeah. So,
yeah, absolutely. It's
yeah.
also it's also really interesting. You might have read this. The I had a fascinating sort of personal experience. A good friend of mine, he and his fiance were coming by my place for dinner, and he got there a little earlier, and we had talked a couple weeks before, and I said, "Hey, be careful." We reviewed all the supplements. I said, he was working with some friends of mine, actually, some anti-aging doctors that do a great job, but they weren't doing a hair analysis. This is what I mean about adding this perspective to your practice. Uh, this was, during peak times of COVID, and he wanted to increase his testosterone and also, ward off against COVID as much as possible. But you can't just blindly supplement. Hence this phrase we go back to again and again: test, don't guess. Um, we weren't, maybe they were even looking at the zinc levels, but you have to look at the ratio of zinc to copper. And I said, be careful, because over time, with that amount of supplementation, you're going to push out copper, and you'll set yourself up for bacterial infection. He didn't think anything of it. We were out paddleboarding that day, and then he came in. I said, "Hey, how's it going?" He said, "Oh," he said, "I just had to spend 3 days last week off of work finding a biological dentist." And I just kind of smiled, and I said, "We talked about this." And he said, "We did?" And I said, "Yeah." And I reiterated that, and he said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, that's what you meant by that." I said, "Yeah, yeah." So there's a balance between viral and bacterial, and he developed a bacterial infection in his mouth for the first time at 42 as an adult, and it was evident, and he paid for that problem. He paid and supplemented his way to that problem, which is, I think, particularly, just when you think about that, that's like, wow.
Very upsetting. Yes, you're trying. I feel badly when people, that's why I try to get as much knowledge as I can to educate people so that, because people want to do the right thing. They just want
You
to be
do?
healthy and they really are trying to do what's best. So I think that's so interesting. So
Yeah,
because we could talk
tons.
for so long. There's so many interesting topics. But in terms of the hair analysis, then, so how does it work? It's also much less expensive. I mean, I'm a big believer in test, don't guess, and I love micronutrient, testing for micronutrients and different things. But this gives a different perspective, and it is less expensive, so you can do it, more frequently, which I know that you feel is quite important.
Mhm.
So two things. The person listening and just wants to see, the nanoparticles, for someone who isn't testing, is the one supplement you would say they'll notice immediately is the magnesium?
Yeah, upgraded magnesium is great. Upgraded memory is really good, because it's 5 different minerals plus some fulvic acid that people will notice.
They'll
Be
notice right away with their
Yeah,
memory.
right away, right away. It depends on the person and how in tune they are with their body.
Mm.
Magnesium they notice, but they almost surely need. The testing, though, is like, so we have a starter pack. I think, kind of, you're mentioning like where to really
Yeah.
start.
So if someone's listening and saying, yes, this sounds interesting, I wouldn't want to see where I'm deficient in my heavy metals, et cetera. I would
Mhm.
like to do this. What's the path?
Yeah, so the place I recommend all of my family go and close friends and stuff is something we call we actually created it for this reason because I answered this question so many times, as you can imagine, like, all right, where do I start? What products can I start taking to feel well, like immediately, and also I want to do the test and consultation. So um, we have a before and after pack, and that's 2 tests, 2 consultations, and 4 supplements that people just almost certainly need. And you can start literally on the side, it'll say like step 1, start taking these products immediately. Step 2, send in your hair, when you can in the next week or so.
Before you start the products, obviously.
No, no, you don't have to, because think about it. The hair is you're going to cut it close to the scalp, and this could be underarm or pubic, but it's going to take a week for even the first little bit of hair to come through the skin, right? For that, so you're creating that tissue, you're growing it. Think of like the Chia Pet commercial a long time ago, except it's even slower motion. So an inch and a half of hair or an inch of hair is something like 6 to 8 weeks of data, depending on the person and their growth rate. So, if you have long hair like you do, Margie, you're just looking at the hair, and you're going to take it from a couple different places on the scalp. We have videos on the site. We don't have to go into it too much. Um, but anyone can do it. Even if you shave your head, then underarm or pubic are the best places. If you have to grow some hair out, then go for it. Do that. And there's instructions. We made it really easy. If you're in the US, you get a prepaid return. It goes back to the lab, you drop it off. So, and please use our paper envelope. Why? Because hair sticks to plastic, so we don't have anything plastic in there. um People used to like put it in a Ziploc, even though there's like clear instructions that are numbered, like step 1, do this, step 2, do that, step 3, do this. So it's clear. On top of that, there's a card in there that you can take to a stylist if you want, whoever cuts your hair, to do that for you. Takes a couple minutes. It'll probably be an interesting conversation, you know give them a tip or something, or have whoever you live with help you out. I've done mine in the mirror by myself, but I've done it a number of times. um, but yeah, you can take it from multiple different places, and you want to do it multiple times a year. I recommend every quarter, every 90 days, because that gives you a map. Of course, because your results will change over time, over 90 days, you don't want to stay on the same supplement regimen. So some of those supplements will likely decrease um, over time, and they'll also change. Like your diet will change. We have a lot of people that start doing more things. Their activity changes, and then they suddenly start running again, and then they start eating a lot more high carb foods possibly, and then they need blood sugar supporting minerals more than they needed them before, for example. So there's a lot of different ways to tune it in. And I always give the example, or I give an example. I give many different examples of this, but let's say you and I are going across the country on a road trip, or just even over to the next town, and you've never been there before. Something like an hour away, you probably look at GPS 20 times in an hour and just glance over and go like, all right, cool. And that is what the test. Now imagine if you wipe that away and you look at it once and you go, all right, cool. So I need to remember all these turns. Okay. And then what happens if you take a wrong turn? You have no idea where you are. That's where people are legitimately when they're not testing anything that they're supplementing. They have lost the map. And I hate that for people, because they can get into that place where, just like Brent was supplementing, his way to worse health. You don't want that. So
Got
uh,
it. So I think the good thing, and for even though like I'm listening and yes, that's great, but if someone can even only afford one time, at
sometimes,
least, because the thing is, so often people have been doing the same program for 5, 10 years, and you want to make sure you're not missing the boat, or there's something
sure.
that's missing. So I think that sounds ideal, but it
Yeah.
would still seem that it would be effective even if you just did it once, to see where your current program is and to make sure you're not. Am I right on that? at
Yeah,
least at
yeah.
least you'll see
At
what may be
least,
causing some of the problems.
Yeah, at least you'll shift your attention in that area, you'll start to care more about it, and once you start to get results, more energy equals you make more money, or you have more time with family, more presence, more better life quality, all of these things, right? I've been obsessed with that equation my whole life, I think, and, yeah, more energy equals you do more, you have a better life, so making
And
this
that's what we
affordable.
want. At the end of the day, I
Yeah,
think this is a good place to end because at the end of the day, that's what we want. That's what you've been working for so people can have a better life. And
absolutely.
that's, all the work I do is people can have a better life, be happier, but you need your cells to be happy too, as your bones, and it all goes together. So, but you're doing a very nice thing. You're giving the community a 20% discount, which is so kind of you
Yeah,
on on the testing as well, correct?
yeah, everything, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the code's happy, everybody. So
That's on your first purchase, so, yeah, I think, yeah, code happy, right, at checkout, so, yep, I'm really happy to do that, and, I think this was really valuable for people, so,
it's so valuable for this population because malabsorption is a huge, huge problem. Nutrient deficiency is a huge problem and one of the root causes that's not always looked at with osteoporosis. And I'm just such a big believer, and we have to dig deep. We have to find all the root causes and deal with each one. And so, this is a way that we can make sure that we're not missing this and that we're not, just doing all our exercise, eating well, because people are really doing wonderful things. So we just want to make sure we're not missing the boat. So
mhm.
thank you for. Is there any last minute things you want to add before we
Oh,
end?
those are great, yeah, really just any symptom you have, just know that it's traced at any age, it's traced back to this in part, yeah.
And I'm so excited. So everybody, I'm going to do the hair analysis, and whether we'll do it as a podcast or we'll just do it as a video, I'm not sure, but I will share the results with everybody. And I eat so well and I supplement, so it'll be very, very interesting what turns up. And because I have not done hair analysis, that's when I've done other mineral analysis, and I've done
Mm,
micronutrient testing, and I've done heavy metal testing. So this will be very interesting.
mhm.
And as well, I'm definitely going to start on your magnesium because
Yeah,
that sounds
that's
so fantastic.
That's so great. Yeah, I'd love for you to go through our whole process with one of our nutritionists, and then you and I can hop on if you like,
Yeah, I'd like to
talk
do that.
about the results and the conversation you had with them and things like that.
Yeah, that will be really, really great. So thank you so much for being here and taking the time. And thank you for really all the work you've done to just make a difference in the world. So thanks so much.
Oh, thanks, Margie. Thank you. This was fun.
I hope you learned as much as I did from my interview with Barton and now have a better understanding of nanoparticles, how we can increase the absorption of nutrients, and what it means test, not guess, and how we can use the hair mineral analysis as a really helpful tool for our bones and overall health. All the links that Barton talked about will be in the show notes. And as I said, I personally am going to be doing a hair mineral analysis, and Barton and I will get together, and I'm not sure where we're going to record it, but I will, at when this is finished, get that information to you as well. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.